The cardboard boxes sat like monuments to failure in the cramped studio apartment. Elias Beaumont stared at the water stains spreading across the ceiling. His 80-year-old daughter, Sophia, curled against his side on the threadbare couch they had salvaged from the curb 3 blocks away. Just 12 hours ago, they had been living in the Ashford mansion. 12 hours ago, Margaret Ashford had stood in the marble foyer, her manicured finger pointing toward the door like a weapon. "You are a complete failure, Elias," she had declared, her voice echoing off the crystal chandelier. "My daughter deserves better than this pathetic excuse for a man." The memory burned fresh. Richard Ashford had nodded in agreement, straightening his silk tie with practiced disdain. "We gave you every opportunity to prove yourself worthy of our family name," he had added coldly. "Instead, you work as a janitor and drive food delivery trucks. This is no environment for Sophia." Now Sophia traced patterns on his worn jacket sleeve, her small voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, are we going to be okay here?" Elias kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "We have each other, sweetheart. That makes us richer than anyone in that big house." Through the thin walls, he could hear the neighbors arguing about unpaid rent. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 in the morning, cutting through the darkness of their studio apartment like a blade. Elias rolled off the couch, his back protesting from another night on the lumpy cushions. Sophia slept peacefully on the narrow bed, her homework spread across the small table they had fashioned from milk crates and a board. He moved quietly through his morning routine, pulling on the Navy janitor uniform that smelled permanently of industrial cleaner. The coffee maker gurgled to life, a $5 thrift store find that produced something barely resembling coffee, but contained enough caffeine to fuel his 18-hour workdays. By 6, he was mopping the floors at Henderson Financial, watching through the windows as expensive cars pulled into the executive parking spaces. The building's marble lobby gleamed under his careful attention, each streak and smudge erased before the first suited figure appeared at 7:15. Margaret Ashford's words echoed in his mind as he worked. A complete failure. The phrase had become a soundtrack to his labor, a constant reminder of how the world saw him. But when he thought of Sophia's sleeping face, peaceful and trusting, the shame transformed into something harder, more determined. At noon, he would race across town to his second job delivering lunch orders, his Honda Civic rattling with every turn. Then evening would bring his third shift at the warehouse, loading trucks until his shoulders ached and his hands cracked from the cold. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick cream paper that felt foreign in Elias's calloused hands. The return address read Thornfield and Associates, attorneys at law, printed in elegant script that seemed to mock the peeling paint of their apartment door. Sophia sat at their makeshift table, carefully eating cereal from a plastic bowl while working through her math homework. She had grown quiet since the move, her bright chatter replaced by a thoughtful reserve that broke Elias's heart daily. He tore open the envelope with trembling fingers, expecting another bill or perhaps legal papers from the Ashfords. Instead, formal letterhead announced that he was requested to attend a meeting regarding the estate of Cornelius Beaumont. The name hit him like cold water. Grandfather Cornelius, who had died when Elias was barely 20, bitter and estranged from the entire family. They had never spoken after Elias chose love over family approval, marrying Claire despite the old man's thunderous disapproval. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Sophia's voice carried the careful concern of a child who had learned to read adult faces too well. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just some old paperwork." He folded the letter carefully, but his mind raced with questions. Why would lawyers contact him about an estate settled 15 years ago? What could his grandfather possibly have left behind that concerned him now? The appointment was scheduled for Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Margaret Ashford's voice cut through the phone like ice. "We're filing for custody, Elias. My granddaughter deserves stability, not whatever pathetic existence you're providing in that hovel." Elias gripped the receiver tighter, watching Sophia through the window as she played alone in the small courtyard behind their building. She had fashioned dolls from paper towels and was conducting an elaborate tea party with invisible guests, her imagination filling the gaps their poverty had created. You have no legal grounds, Margaret. Claire left Sophia with me. She's my daughter. A bitter laugh crackled through the line. Legal grounds? Look around you, Elias. You work 3 menial jobs and can barely afford rent. We can provide her with private schools, tutors, a proper home. Any judge will see the obvious choice. The line went dead, leaving Elias staring at the silent phone. Through the thin walls, he could hear their neighbors' television blaring game shows, a constant reminder of how close they lived to strangers, how little privacy their new life afforded. Sophia bounded through the door, her cheeks flushed from play. Daddy, I made friends with Mrs. Chin next door. She taught me how to fold paper cranes. Look, she held up a delicate origami bird, perfectly creased despite being made from notebook paper. That's beautiful, sweetheart. He pulled her close, inhaling her warmth while his mind churned with legal fears. The law office of Thornfield and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a gleaming downtown tower. Elias felt acutely aware of his second-hand suit as he stepped off the elevator, the fabric pulling tight across his shoulders from years of physical labor. Helena Thornfield rose from behind an enormous mahogany desk, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her navy suit probably cost more than Elias earned in 3 months. Mr. Beaumont, thank you for coming. Please sit down. She gestured to a leather chair that seemed to swallow him whole. I realized this meeting must seem quite mysterious, given the circumstances. Elias shifted uncomfortably. I don't understand why you'd contact me about my grandfather's estate. He died 15 years ago, and we weren't exactly close. Helena opened a thick file folder, revealing documents sealed with red wax. That's precisely why this meeting is necessary. Your grandfather made some very specific arrangements before his death, arrangements that were not to be disclosed until certain conditions were met. What kind of conditions? Helena's eyes held a strange mixture of sympathy and anticipation. Conditions regarding your character, Mr. Beaumont. Your grandfather was quite particular about ensuring his heir possessed certain qualities. She paused, studying his weathered face. Qualities that can only be proven through adversity and time. Helena leaned forward, her fingers tracing the edge of the sealed documents. Your grandfather was a complicated man, Mr. Beaumont. Brilliant in business, but deeply wounded by family betrayals. When you chose to marry Claire against his wishes, he was furious. Elias remembered that final confrontation, Cornelius's face purple with rage as he declared his grandson dead to him. But Claire had been worth every harsh word, every severed connection. However, Helena continued, he also respected your choice. In his final months, he had you investigated. Not maliciously, but thoroughly. He wanted to understand the man you had become. The revelation sent ice through Elias's veins. Investigated? Your work ethic, your devotion to Claire during her illness, your commitment to Sophia after her death. He watched you refuse financial help from the Ashfords, watched you work multiple jobs to maintain your independence. She smiled softly. He was quite impressed. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Elias could see the city spreading below, a maze of glass and steel where he scraped together his daily existence. None of this made sense. His grandfather had despised him, had cut all ties. The conditions of his will were very specific, Helena said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You had to prove yourself worthy through 15 years of hardship, integrity, and genuine character. She reached for the red wax seal. That period ended last month. The wax seal cracked under Helena's careful fingers, releasing documents that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the office windows. Elias felt his heart hammering against his ribs as she spread the papers across the polished desk. The last will and testament of Cornelius Edmund Beaumont, she read aloud, her voice steady and professional. To my grandson, Elias Beaumont, who chose love over fortune and proved himself worthy through sacrifice and devotion. The words blurred before Elias's eyes. He gripped the leather armrests, afraid he might collapse from the sudden rush of blood to his head. This couldn't be real. His grandfather had died hating him. Helena's voice continued, each word landing like a physical blow. "I'll leave my entire estate, valued at approximately $200 million, including all properties, investments, and business holdings." 200 million. The number echoed in the vast office like thunder. Elias thought of Sophia, eating cereal from plastic bowls, sleeping on a mattress that sagged in the middle. He thought of Margaret's cruel words, of the custody threat hanging over them like a storm cloud. "There are conditions, of course," Helena said gently. "The inheritance comes with responsibilities. Your grandfather established several charitable foundations that will require your oversight." Elias stared at his hands, calloused and stained from years of honest work. How is this possible? How could his grandfather have planned this elaborate test while maintaining such perfect hatred? Elias sat in his battered Honda outside Sophia's school, the inheritance documents folded in his jacket pocket like a secret too dangerous to believe. Through the windshield, he watched other parents arrive in gleaming SUVs, their designer clothes and confident postures marking them as members of a world he had never belonged to. But now, technically, he owned more than most of them combined. The school bell rang, and children poured through the doors in a cascade of backpacks and laughter. Sophia emerged near the end, walking slowly with her head down, her paper crane from yesterday clutched in one small fist. "Hey, sweetheart," he called through the open window. "How was your day?" She climbed into the passenger seat, her face troubled. "Tommy Martinez said his mom heard we got kicked out because you can't pay rent. He said poor people shouldn't have kids." The words hit Elias like a physical blow. He pulled Sophia close, feeling the familiar rage at a world that judged children by their parents' bank accounts. If only Tommy's mother knew the truth, now burning in his pocket. "Daddy, are we really poor?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Elias looked into her trusting eyes, thinking of Helena's revelation, of the $200 million that could change everything. But money couldn't erase the lessons they had learned together about resilience, about finding joy in simple things, about the dignity that came from honest work. The custody hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock on a gray Thursday morning. Elias sat in the courthouse hallway, his best suit pressed and his shoes polished, but he knew the Ashfords would see only failure when they looked at him. Margaret and Richard arrived precisely at 8:45, flanked by two attorneys in $1,000 suits. Margaret's pearls caught the fluorescent lighting as she swept past Elias without acknowledgement, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to judgment. Their lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Vincent Corley, spread documents across a mahogany briefcase. Financial records showing Elias's minimal income, photographs of the cramped studio apartment, testimony from neighbors about the building's questionable safety. "Mr. Beaumont," Corley said smoothly, "surely you can see that continuing the charade serves no one's interests, especially Sophia's. My clients are prepared to offer generous visitation rights in exchange for custody." Through the courtroom windows, Elias could see Helena Thornfield's sleek sedan pulling into the parking lot. She had insisted on attending, claiming legal protocol required her presence for inheritance documentation. But Elias suspected she had other motives. The bailiff called their case number, and Margaret rose with theatrical dignity. Today, she announced to no one in particular, justice will finally be served. Elias touched the inheritance papers in his pocket one final time, then followed them into the courtroom where his life would change forever. Judge Patricia Clemens reviewed the custody petition with practiced efficiency, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. The Ashford sat rigidly in the front row, radiating confidence and entitlement like expensive perfume. Vincent Corley rose smoothly to address the court. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly demonstrates that Mr. Beaumont cannot provide adequate care for his daughter. 3 minimum wage jobs, substandard housing, and no educational resources." Margaret nodded approvingly, her diamond wedding ring catching the courtroom lights as she folded her hands in her lap. Behind her, Richard checked his gold watch with obvious impatience. However, Corley continued, "My clients offer stability, private education, and a trust fund ensuring Sophia's future security." Judge Clemens looked over her glasses at Elias. "Mr. Beaumont, how do you respond to these allegations about your financial instability?" Before Elias could speak, the courtroom doors opened with a soft whisper. Helena Thornfield entered, carrying a leather portfolio that seemed to command attention despite its simple appearance. She moved with quiet authority toward the plaintiff's table. "Your Honor," Helena said, her voice cutting through the courtroom's tension like silk, "I represent the Beaumont family estate. There are some materials pertinent to this custody determination that the court should review." Margaret turned in her seat, confusion flickering across her perfectly composed features. Richard frowned, clearly trying to place Helena's familiar face. Helena opened the leather portfolio with deliberate precision, removing documents that bore official seals and bank letterheads. "Your Honor," she announced, "Mr. Elias Beaumont is the sole heir to the Cornelius Beaumont estate, valued at $200 million. The courtroom erupted in stunned silence. Margaret's face went ashen, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly stark against her pale skin. Richard's mouth fell open, his gold watch forgotten as his hand dropped his lap. Vincent Corley stammered, "Objection, Your Honor. This information wasn't disclosed during discovery." Judge Clemens studied the inheritance documents with growing amazement. "Mr. Beaumont, were you aware of this inheritance when these proceedings began?" Elias stood slowly, his voice steady despite the earthquake of emotions in his chest. "I learned of it 3 days ago, Your Honor. My grandfather's will contain specific conditions that had to be met over 15 years. Helena stepped forward. "Cornelius Beaumont required his heir to demonstrate character through adversity. Mr. Elias Beaumont has done exactly that, working multiple jobs while maintaining his integrity and devotion to his daughter." Margaret finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. $200 million? The judge reviewed the final pages of documentation. "Mr. Corley, given this substantial change in circumstances, do your clients wish to continue pursuing custody?" Vincent Corley looked helplessly at the Ashfords, who sat frozen in their seats like marble statues of their former arrogance. 6 months later, Elias stood in the bright kitchen of their new home, watching Sophia arrange fresh flowers in a crystal vase. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the girl who no longer carried paper cranes but real hope in her eyes. The Ashfords had withdrawn their custody petition that very day in court, their lawyer mumbling apologies about misunderstandings. Margaret had attempted reconciliation weeks later, arriving with expensive gifts and hollow explanations about family bonds. Elias had received her with quiet dignity, offering tea and polite conversation while firmly establishing boundaries. Sophia deserved grandparents who loved her unconditionally, not ones who measured affection by bank statements. The inheritance had transformed more than their living situation. Elias now oversaw 3 charitable foundations, helping families facing the same struggles he had endured. The Beaumont Family Foundation provided emergency assistance to single parents, ensuring no child would face Tommy Martinez's cruel observations about poverty. "Daddy," Sophia called from the garden door, "Mrs. Chun is here with more origami patterns." Their former neighbor had become a cherished friend, her wisdom about finding beauty in simple materials now a shared philosophy rather than desperate necessity. Helena Thornfield visited regularly too, having evolved from legal counsel to trusted advisor and family friend. If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've witnessed similar hidden worth in someone you know.